15 years in emergency services taught me how to stay calm when everything's falling apart. Fires, collapsed buildings, panicked screams, I've been through it all. But nothing in all that training prepared me for what I'd see at a celebration thrown in my own honor. The city of Albuquerque had decided to recognize me for my years of service. I didn't ask for it. The chief said it was important for morale, for recruitment, for honoring sacrifice. So I went along. Emily, my wife of 13 years, was ecstatic. She insisted on helping plan the whole thing. She said I deserved the world that night. I didn't realize until much later how far her world had drifted from mine. The event was held at the Rio Vista Community Hall. It's one of those places that tries hard to look fancy, string lights, a rented bar, shiny floors that echo when heels click across them. I wore my dress blues, the ones that barely fit anymore. Emily wore a fitted sapphire blue dress that turned heads. When I told her she looked incredible, she gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and said, "You only get one night like this, right?" The place was full. Friends, coworkers, a few city officials I barely knew, and plenty of Emily's colleagues from the hospital where she volunteered. It started out the way these things usually do, speeches full of forced laughter, a slideshow that made me look like I hadn't aged a day, and enough polite applause to last a lifetime. I kept my smile on, shaking hands, saying thank you, trying to feel something other than exhausted. But somewhere between the second round of drinks and the mayor's speech, I started noticing something that knocked the wind out of me. Emily was standing near the corner of the room, talking to a tall man in a dark gray suit. I didn't recognize him, which wasn't unusual. Emily knows a lot of people through the hospital, charity events, and the city's public outreach programs. But it was the way she talked to him that pulled me in. The tilt of her head. The way she touched his arm and let her hand linger too long on his knee when she sat beside him. I know my wife. I know what flirty looks like, even if I convinced myself I didn't have to worry about that kind of thing anymore. I kept glancing at them as I moved through the room, making small talk with people I hadn't seen in years. Every time I looked back, they were still at it, laughing, leaning in close, talking like they were the only two people in the room. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Years, maybe? Eventually, I walked over. Not fast. Just enough to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Emily spotted me first. She straightened in her seat like she'd been caught doing something halfway inappropriate. Her hand slipped off his knee, and that's when she turned and gave me the same well-rehearsed smile she used on strangers and fundraisers. "Hey, Trev," she said. "You remember Eric, don't you? He worked on that downtown redevelopment grant." I shook his hand. Firm grip. Confident. The guy looked me in the eye with a practiced ease, like he didn't see me as a threat. That was probably the moment my gut twisted into a knot. Eric gave me a nod, leaned back, and said, "You've got quite the resume, man. Emily's told me all about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, trying to sound halfway human. "Of course," Eric said, flashing a grin that showed off perfect teeth. I walked away after a minute, not wanting to linger. I didn't want to make a scene. But the image of her hand on his knee followed me like smoke in my lungs. I tried to focus on the rest of the evening. Someone handed me a plaque. My son Zach gave a short speech. He's 17, quiet, thoughtful, sharp in ways I'll never be. He talked about how proud he was of me, and I held it together for him. Just barely. Later, I made my way to the restroom to get a moment alone. The hallways were quieter there, just far enough from the main room to dull the music and chatter. On the way back, I passed a small alcove where a group of people had gathered, Emily's coworkers. They were laughing, drinks in hand, and I heard her voice. "I swear," she said through laughter, "he still thinks the uniform makes him some kind of superhero. I mean, don't get me wrong, what he does is important, but come on, the guy literally drinks black coffee, watches westerns, and thinks that makes him deep." More laughter. Someone else added, "He's like if John Wayne was a little more tired and a lot more boring." I froze. I didn't step into view. I just stood there, out of sight, and listened as they continued. "He's sweet," another said, "but Emily, seriously, you could do better." "No offense." "None taken," Emily replied. "I mean, I still care about him, obviously. But it's like, I don't know. It's like being married to a fire extinguisher. Useful in a crisis, but just kind of sits there otherwise." That line got the biggest laugh. Then there was silence, followed by an awkward shuffle. I stepped back quickly, heart pounding. She must have seen me. When I returned to the main room, she was at the bar, glass of wine in hand, laughing with the same group like nothing had happened. She caught my eye and smiled again. The kind of smile you wear when everything's under control. When you want to pretend the world hasn't just shifted under your feet. I didn't say anything. I didn't storm out or make a scene. I just stood there, surrounded by congratulations and empty compliments, wondering how I had missed the signs. Wondering how long she'd been slipping away from me, one sarcastic comment, one subtle eye roll, one whispered conversation at a time. People came up and thanked me for my service. Told me how lucky I was to have such a supportive wife. I nodded, smiled, and shook hands. But all I could think about was that hallway, her laughter, and the way she looked at a stranger like he was her whole world. And not once, during the entire evening, did she ever look at me that way. I didn't say a word on the drive home. Emily chatted like nothing had happened, how proud she was of me, how everyone seemed so impressed, how great the food turned out. Her voice bounced around the inside of the car like an echo in a tunnel. I stared straight ahead, hands on the wheel, nodding occasionally just to keep the peace. Every nod felt like betrayal, like I was lying to myself just to get through the night. When we got home, she kissed me on the cheek and said she was going to soak in the tub, something she rarely did anymore. I sat on the couch, alone, and stared at the muted television while the pipes hummed in the walls. And that was when it started. You know how sometimes a single moment makes the past snap into focus? Like someone finally turned the lights on in a room you've lived in for years but never really looked at? That was what it felt like. Suddenly, all the things I had brushed off, explained away, or flat out ignored came rushing back with merciless clarity. The new perfume. She'd said she got a sample from work. It was heavy, musky, and didn't suit her at all. I used to love the scent she wore when we first met, light, citrusy, simple. But this one lingered, clung to her even after she'd been gone for hours. I remember asking her once if she liked it and she'd smiled and said, "It's not really for me." The gym. She started going almost every day, but always alone. She used to beg me to come with her, said we should be healthy together. Now it was her escape. She'd come back sweaty, sure, but not in the usual way. I couldn't describe it, not then, but now I could. It wasn't just sweat. It was perfume and something off. Something I couldn't place. The volunteering. She said she'd picked up extra shifts at the free clinic. That was something I used to admire her for, her compassion. But she stopped bringing home stories. No more funny patient anecdotes or dramatic tales from the ER. Just silence. And when she came home, it wasn't with the smell of antiseptic or latex gloves, it was wine. Subtle but there. And the suitcase. God, I almost forgot the suitcase. It was a Thursday night a few months back. I came home late from a double shift and walked into the living room to find her standing over a packed suitcase. She jumped when she saw me, said it was for a charity drive. They're collecting clothing and toiletries for women in shelters, she'd explained. I figured I'd just throw it all in one bag. But there were shoes in there. Heels. Not donated hers. I didn't ask. I should have. I just kissed her on the forehead and went to shower. And then there was her phone. She used to leave it lying around. Now it was glued to her palm like a third hand. She took it to the bathroom, kept it face down during dinner, and every time a message buzzed, she swiped it away so fast I barely caught a glimpse. Once she smiled at a text and muttered a name, Eric. When I asked who Eric was, she blinked and said, "Did I say Eric? I meant Aaron. A nurse from the clinic." She laughed it off. I laughed too. But I wasn't laughing now. I got up from the couch and walked quietly to the bathroom door. It was cracked open. I could hear the water running and her humming softly to herself. That same tune she always used to hum when she was in a good mood. I used to love that sound. Now it made my stomach twist. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair damp and smelling like that new perfume. She kissed my cheek again and said, "You were amazing tonight, Trev. I'm proud of you." I just nodded. Again. And again it felt like a lie. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to her breathe beside me, wondering how long I'd been this blind. I didn't know whether to feel ashamed, furious, or just tired. Mostly I felt hollow. Like everything inside me had been scooped out and replaced with static. In the morning, I made coffee like I always did. She came down in leggings and a hoodie, hair up in a ponytail, and said she had to run to the gym. "You want to come?" she asked, pouring almond milk into her protein shake. I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "Nah," I said, keeping my voice light. "Got a long shift today. You have fun." She left a minute later, kissed my cheek again, and was gone. I walked straight into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down her gym bag. She had a newer one she carried now. This was the old one, the one she used to use all the time. It was shoved behind some shoeboxes. I unzipped it and found a water bottle, some resistance bands, and a pair of old sneakers. Underneath those was something that didn't belong. A phone. Not hers. Or rather, it was, but it wasn't the one she carried. This was a burner. Cheap, scratched, prepaid? I turned it on. No password. Just open access. I guess she didn't expect anyone to find it. There were texts. Hundreds of them. Some from Eric. Some from numbers not saved in the contact list. Most were flirtatious. Some explicit. But all of them told the same story. She'd been seeing someone. Likely more than one person. For months. One message read, "He's home late tonight. Meet you at 7. Another, "I don't want to live the rest of my life chained to a washed-up hero." There were pictures. Her in a mirror, half-dressed. Him in a hotel room, lying in bed. I recognized the comforter. The framed cityscape on the wall. It was a hotel downtown San Diego. She said she went there for a conference 2 months ago. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. There were audio clips too. In one, she was talking to someone, I assumed Eric, about finances. "He doesn't know," she said. "He still thinks everything's fine. But I've already spoken to a lawyer. If we file in New Mexico, I can still get the house and half the retirement." My retirement. My home. Our son's room. I sat down on the edge of the bed and listened to that clip 3 times. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the betrayal sink into my bones like water into wood. I should have confronted her that morning. I should have said something, anything. But I didn't. I put the burner phone back where I found it. I zipped up the bag and tucked it away again. Then I got dressed, went to work, and did my job like always. Because I needed time. Time to figure out what came next. Time to decide who I was going to be now that my entire life had been cracked wide open. And time to make sure that when I did confront her, when I finally looked her in the eye and asked her the question that had been burning in my chest, I would have every answer ready before she had a chance to lie again. Emily told me about the San Diego trip 2 weeks in advance, like she was giving me plenty of time to process it. "It's just a quick conference," she said, folding laundry like we were discussing dinner plans. 3 nights. Just nurses and some clinic directors. Nothing fancy. I nodded, watching her from across the room. Her movements were too precise, like she'd practiced them. "Sounds important," I replied. She smiled. "It is. I'll be networking all weekend, so I might not text much. Don't worry if I'm quiet." That part made my stomach twist. She knew I'd notice. She was cutting off the trail before it even started. I waited until she was asleep that night before digging out the old tablet from the junk drawer in the garage. She'd used it years ago for recipes and Pinterest boards before moving on to her phone. It was dusty, slow, and barely held a charge, but it was still logged into her cloud account. I sat in the dark with that tablet on my lap, heart pounding like I was defusing a bomb. It synced after a few minutes. Photos, calendar, even location data. I opened the tracking app. San Diego was already bookmarked. The morning she left, I watched her roll a sleek black suitcase out to her car. She kissed me goodbye like we hadn't been sleeping in silence for the past month. "I'll call when I land," she said. "Safe travels," I told her. I watched her car pull away, then sat down at the kitchen table, tablet in hand, and waited. The dot pinged to life at 2:17 p.m. San Diego International Airport. Then a hotel, the Del Monte. Downtown, upscale, the kind of place people stayed when someone else was footing the bill. I booked a flight that afternoon. Nothing extravagant. Just a one-way ticket and a camera in my coat pocket. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not Zach, not my friends at the station, not even my brother who usually covered for me when I needed personal days. This wasn't about revenge or spectacle. It was about truth. I landed the next morning and made my way to the hotel on foot, keeping to the edges of the crowd. I wasn't even sure what I was expecting, some dramatic confession, a confrontation in the lobby? But when I saw them, there was no need for words. She came out of the elevator at 10:41 a.m. Her hair was curled. She wore a sundress I'd never seen before, low-cut, flowing, made for photos. On her arm was Eric, the same man from the event. He had his hand on her lower back, leading her like they were out for brunch after a long night. They walked past the fountain, laughing. Her laugh. I hadn't heard that laugh in a long time. It wasn't nervous or polite. It was real. She looked at him like he was gravity. And she was free-falling. I didn't approach them. Didn't say a word. I took photos, clear, unmistakable, time-stamped. I followed at a distance for half a block as they strolled into a cafe across from the harbor. More photos. A short video. Her hand on his arm. Their fingers interlaced over coffee. I slipped away. Back at my own hotel, I watched the footage on repeat until the battery ran dry. The facts were undeniable. The burner phone, the texts, the subtle digs at home, it was all leading here. And now I had proof. Not just for myself. For court. For the narrative she was already building behind my back. That night, I took a cab to the airport and flew home. Emily returned 2 days later. She brought back keychains and a generic souvenir mug with palm trees and California love printed in faded lettering. She acted tired, jet-lagged, distracted. Said the conference had been informative but exhausting. I smiled. I even thanked her for the mug. But I was already miles ahead of her. The next day, when she went to the store, I searched through her current gym bag. It took less than 2 minutes to find what I was looking for. Another burner phone. This one newer. Sleeker. Hidden beneath a spare change of clothes and a sealed protein bar. I powered it on, expecting to find the usual texts and calls. What I found instead made my throat tighten. Audio clips. Dozens. Recordings of her venting, confessing, scheming. Some of them were clearly made in her car. I recognized the hum of the engine and the soft tick of the blinker. One clip started mid-sentence. I don't know how much longer I can play the dutiful wife. He still looks at me like I'm his whole world and I just want to scream. I feel trapped in this outdated fairy tale. I want a life that's mine. In another, she was on the phone with someone, likely Eric. Her voice was lower, more careful. If I can get him to agree to mediation, I'll keep the pension. If not, we might have to push the trauma angle. Make it sound like I was emotionally neglected. There was no pain in her voice. No shame. Just strategy. Another clip, Zach's already checked out. He's more like his dad every day. Cold. Just flat. I don't know what happened to either of them. That one stung the most. Because Zach hadn't changed. He was the same kid who used to sit on my shoulders during 4th of July fireworks. Who waited by the door when I came back from long shifts. Who still asked if I was okay when I rubbed my knee from an old injury. He wasn't flat. He was tired of being ignored by the woman who used to kiss him goodnight without checking her phone. I compiled everything: videos, *TS, audio, location data. I created a folder on a thumb drive and locked it in the fireproof box in my closet. Emily didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't ask. In public, she acted like the perfect partner. At church, she held my hand. At dinner with neighbors, she leaned into me when she laughed. Online, she posted old photos of us with captions like, "My hero Rehart," and "So proud of everything we've built." Behind the scenes, she was laying the groundwork for an exit she thought I couldn't see coming. She had no idea I already had the playbook. And still, I didn't confront her. I wanted to. I thought about it every night. But something deeper held me back. It wasn't fear. It was patience. The kind you only develop after running into burning buildings with no backup and learning to wait for the right moment to act. I needed the full picture. I needed the pieces she hadn't even played yet. Because this wasn't just about a failed marriage. It wasn't even just about betrayal. It was about control. And for the first time in a long time, I had it. I didn't sleep much after I returned from San Diego. I'd lie awake next to her, the woman I used to know, and listen to the steady rhythm of her breath. She slept soundly, peacefully. And that told me everything I needed to know. There was no guilt in her. No conflict. She thought she'd pulled it off. That she had time. That I would stay silent long enough for her to finish whatever she was setting up. But I wasn't silent. I was planning. Every free moment I had, every lunch break, every quiet hour after Zach had gone to bed, I spent reviewing what I'd gathered, organizing it, labeling it, backing it up. I created folders on flash drives and hidden cloud accounts. If she tried to twist things later, I'd have receipts ready before she even opened her mouth. I documented everything, not just the affair, the manipulation, the financial trail, the subtle cruelty that chipped away at my trust year after year. I didn't need to embellish. The truth was corrosive enough. There was a voice recording from 3 weeks earlier. She had no idea her burner phone caught it. She was on the phone with someone, her voice casual, breezy. "If I can drag it out long enough, he'll cave. He always folds when things get messy. If I play it right, I'll have the house, the car, and the kid. Not that I even want custody. But it'll make the settlement easier if I act like I do. Not Zach. Just the kid." I listened to that one twice. That was when I knew what I had to do. No more waiting. No more playing defense. It was time. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Emily's parents were hosting Sunday lunch. A family tradition we'd kept up even when everything else started to fall apart. Her dad grilled. Her mom made potato salad from scratch. It was the kind of wholesome gathering people posted about online with hashtags like #FamilyFirst and #Blessed. They invited everyone, her siblings, her cousins, even a couple of coworkers. I wasn't surprised. Emily always liked an audience when she played the doting wife. And I wanted an audience too. Zach didn't want to go. He'd been pulling back from her for months. Ever since he caught her lying about where she'd been one weekend. He never told her. He told me, quietly, one night, standing in the garage while I was fixing the lawnmower. I saw her, he said. She said she was at the clinic. But I saw her downtown. With some guy. They were holding hands. I didn't react. I just said, thanks for telling me. So when he asked if he could skip the lunch, I said, no. You should be there. He didn't argue. I wore jeans and a button-down. Nothing fancy. Just clean. Polished. The way you dress when you're about to bury something important. We arrived just before noon. Emily was already there, helping her mom in the kitchen. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "You okay?" Like she hadn't just spent the last 6 months rehearsing her exit. I nodded. Yeah. You. Perfect, she said, with that same glint she used when she lied. People made small talk. They asked about work. Congratulated me on the award ceremony. One of her cousins asked when we were going to take that trip to Oregon we talked about. Emily answered for me, saying we'd been too busy with life to plan anything. Eventually, everyone sat down at the big table in the backyard. Zach sat across from me, silent, arms folded. Emily sat beside me, smiling, sipping lemonade like we were still a team. That's when I pulled out the folder. It was plain, black, thick, labeled simply, "For the record." I set it on the table in front of me, cleared my throat and said, I need everyone to hear something. It won't take long. Conversations stopped. Forks froze midair. Emily glanced at the folder, then at me, her smile faltering for the first time. Trevor? She asked, voice tight. What is that? I didn't look at her. I opened the folder and began laying the contents across the table like evidence in a courtroom. A photo of her and Eric outside the Delmont Hotel. A printed transcript of her conversation about the divorce. Screensh *TS of texts. Still images from the burner phone camera. Printed emails from her secret account. And finally, a USB drive in a labeled envelope. I've spent the last few months gathering the truth, I said calmly. Not assumptions. Not guesses. Just facts. People stared, silent. Emily reached for the folder, but I put my hand over it. No, you've had your time. Now it's mine. I turned to her parents. I want to start by thanking you both for always treating me like a son. That's why I'm saying this here. I won't be gaslight. I won't be lied about behind closed doors. I want the truth out in the open. Emily stood. Trevor, stop this. Whatever you think. Don't. I interrupted. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You planned to take the house. You planned to take half of my pension. You talked about using Zach like a pawn. Zach stood too. Slowly. His face pale. Is that true? Emily looked between us, desperate now. Zach, baby. Don't, he said, echoing me. She reached for him. He backed away. Someone whispered, Jesus Christ. I continued. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'll be filing for divorce this week. The evidence in this folder is more than enough to protect my rights. And Zach's. I'm not asking for support. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just want everyone here to know who's really been pulling the strings. Emily tried again. This is ridiculous. It's fake. You're twisting things. I handed her mother a copy of the San Diego hotel receipt. Her father stared at it like it might explode. I have audio too, I said. If anyone wants to hear her describe our marriage as a PR liability, it's all on the drive. Emily's hands trembled. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Zach turned and walked out of the backyard, through the house, and down the street. He didn't come back. Emily collapsed into her seat. Her cousin stood and left without saying a word. Her mom didn't look at her. Her dad closed the folder, stood up, and followed Zach. The party dissolved. She was alone. I stayed until everyone else had gone. Not to gloat. Not to punish, but to watch the illusion break completely. She sat there with her lemonade, hands shaking, staring at the pile of evidence like it had materialized out of nowhere. You could have just talked to me, she whispered. I looked at her. Not with anger. Not even sadness. You stopped talking first, I said. Then I picked up the folder, walked through the empty house, and got in my car. By the time I got home, Zach was in the garage, sitting on the edge of the workbench with his head down. Hey, I said. He didn't look up. I heard all of it. Good, I said. I wanted you to. He nodded. So, what now? I sat down beside him. We move forward, I said. We don't pretend anymore. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, can I stay with you? I put my hand on his shoulder. You already are. We left Albuquerque 3 weeks after the fallout. There wasn't a dramatic farewell, no tearful goodbye at the airport, no moment of reconciliation. Emily had moved into a small apartment across town, one she must have been looking at long before I found out. Zach hadn't spoken to her since the day of the reveal. I didn't push him. He was 17 and already carrying more than he should have. I figured the best thing I could do now was give him space, stability, and the option to heal without pressure. So we left. The house we lived in, the one I spent years remodeling, painting, patching, fixing, I let it go. Sold it faster than I thought I could. Maybe part of me didn't want the memories to have time to sink in. Every corner held echoes of something that wasn't real anymore. Emily's laughter in the kitchen, our wedding photo by the stairs, the coat hook she never used but always insisted we needed, it all just felt like props on a stage that had finally gone dark. Instead, we packed up what mattered. Zach's guitar, my dad's old tools, family photos that didn't include her. And we headed north. My grandfather had left me a cabin years ago. Tucked away near Echo Lake in rural Montana, it was the kind of place most people used as a weekend escape. I'd been there a few times growing up, usually during summers. It was quiet, peaceful, surrounded by pine trees and the kind of silence you only get when there's no traffic, no neighbors, no Wi-Fi to distract you. Perfect. Zach didn't complain. He didn't say much at all, really. But I saw something in him during that first drive into the valley, a loosening, like he could finally breathe. The cabin was rough around the edges, like most things that had been forgotten for too long. The porch sagged in places, the roof needed patching, and the inside smelled like old wood and dust. But it was ours. No one else's name on the deed. No one else's fingerprints on the walls. We got to work right away. Every morning, we made coffee on the gas stove, ate breakfast, and made a list. Zach took to it faster than I expected. One day we patched shingles. The next we built a new chicken wire fence to keep deer out of the garden. We repainted the exterior a soft slate blue, the same shade my grandfather had used decades ago. We didn't talk about Emily. We didn't talk much at all. And maybe that was what made it work. Some days, we'd finish early and drive into the nearest town, population 3,000. We'd grab sandwiches from the general store, sit on the tailgate of the truck, and watch clouds roll over the hills. I'd ask him about school, his friends, music. Sometimes he'd answer. Sometimes he'd just nod. But slowly, over weeks, his shoulders lowered. His voice steadied. He smiled more. And so did I. It wasn't instant. Healing never is. But it was steady. Honest. Quiet. Then Jenna showed up. I hadn't seen her since that night in San Diego, though I remembered her face. She was Eric's sister. I recognized her immediately when she stepped out of a dusty SUV one afternoon, clutching a manila envelope. I was splitting logs behind the cabin. She walked up with cautious steps. Trevor Lawson? She asked. I wiped my hands and nodded. Yeah, that's me. She offered a small, polite smile. I'm Jenna, Eric's sister. I didn't respond. Just waited. I'm not here for him, she said quickly. I haven't spoken to Eric since everything blew up. I found something that belongs to you. And I thought you should have it. She handed me the envelope. Inside were printed emails, long threads between Emily and Eric. Legal documents. Notes on timelines, financial accounts. And a short, handwritten letter from Emily to him dated 2 weeks before the event at the community center. I want him to break first, it read. That's how we win. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the letter back into the envelope. Why are you giving me this? I asked. Jenna looked down at her boots. Because what they did was wrong. And because I don't want to be anything like them. That was all. She didn't stay long. Said she was heading up north to visit a friend but might stop by again. I told her we were around most days. I didn't know if I meant it at the time. But a few days later, she came back. This time she brought lunch, pulled pork sandwiches, and iced tea. Zach was wary at first. So was I. But she was kind, patient, and nothing like her brother. She asked about the cabin, about the lake, about the birds that kept nesting in the old chimney. She didn't bring up the past again. Not once. She started showing up once a week. Then twice. Eventually, it wasn't strange to see her truck in the driveway or her laugh echoing across the yard while Zach showed her how to fix the screen door. She became part of our days. Not an intrusion. Not a replacement. Just presence. Quiet, steady presence. I never asked her why she kept coming back. I didn't need to. And she never asked about Emily. There was no curiosity, no backhanded sympathy, no apologies for someone else's sins. She just existed in the space we were rebuilding, and somehow that was enough. We didn't call what we had a relationship. There were no labels, no late-night confessions, no rush to define anything. It wasn't about starting something new. It was about letting something grow, slow and quiet like the pine trees that surrounded us. Zach warmed up to her quickly. He started playing guitar on the porch again, sometimes while she read nearby. They'd talk about music, about how he wanted to maybe apply to trade school next year, about nothing and everything. And I watched from the other side of the yard, not as a father waiting for approval, but as a man realizing that peace, real peace, might actually be possible. Sometimes I still caught myself expecting Emily to text or call. Maybe to lash out. Maybe to beg. But she didn't. Not really. She left the state quietly, according to the paperwork her lawyer sent through mine. She signed over her share of the house without protest. She didn't fight custody, maybe realizing Zach was never going to choose her again. She sent one letter, brief and sterile, about taxes and mutual contacts. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. One night, as we sat by the fire pit, Zach roasting a marshmallow while Jenna flipped through an old photo album I'd brought from Albuquerque, I felt something shift inside me. A click. Like my soul had finally realigned with itself. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't numb either. I was just okay. The kind of okay you don't trust at first. But it stays. And eventually you realize it's not going anywhere. Jenna looked up from the album and smiled. You really had a mullet in high school? Zach burst out laughing, marshmallow forgotten. I shook my head. It was the 90s. There were no rules. And just like that, the past felt lighter. Not erased. Just smaller. We were still rebuilding the cabin. There were still weeds to pull and fences to paint and porches to seal. But we were doing it together. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. And in the stillness of that place, surrounded by trees and laughter and second chances, I finally understood something I'd spent months trying to wrap my head around. Sometimes peace doesn't come from answers or revenge. It comes from starting again. Far away from the noise. Far from the lies. Far from everything you thought you couldn't live without.